This is an American ballot. With it, you're free to vote for anyone to represent you in politics, so long as they've raised millions of dollars and are running with one of two parties. But once in office, they can deliver on all their promises. Well, so long as they decide to keep them. This is American democracy, and it's strange comparing it to the original democracy from 2,500 years ago. This is an ancient Greek ballot from Athens. With it, you don't vote for anyone except yourself if you want to. There's no majority decision, just the random draw of a name, and Blade Peterson has been selected for a seat in Congress. Maybe that's you. This is a lottery, and it's democracy as originally intended. Politics without politicians. But why should anyone take this seriously? I mean, letting random people run the country? Really? Except, why should anyone take this seriously? In America, public approval of Congress hovers around 15%. Here, and in Britain and France, 2/3 of citizens think their government corrupt. And it's not hard to tell why. Politicians openly engage in insider trading, take bribes they call campaign finance, consort with complete monsters, and after office, take jobs at big corporations they protected from regulation. And none of that should surprise us. Aristotle, an ancient Greek philosopher who lived in this political system, literally wrote the book on politics that gave us the terms like democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. And in it, he wrote thousands of years ago, "It is accepted as democratic when public offices are allocated by lottery, and as oligarchic when they are filled by election." Elections produce an unaccountable, corrupt, and immoral political elite because they are oligarchic by design. Because elections have 4 big problems: selection bias, cognitive bias, corruption, and most fatal of all, what James Madison called the mortal disease of government: polarization. Lotteries, on the other hand, well, they aren't just more democratic, they actually work better because they solve all those problems with 4 ancient principles: koinos, sophos, euthena, and henates. And I'm going to explain each of them. But you don't have to take my word for it. After all, the city that used lotteries, that invented this system, Athens, was one of the richest and most powerful civilizations of its time and produced some of the greatest minds in history: Plato, Socrates, Diogenes, Euripides, Thucydides, the fathers of philosophy, science, drama, and history. Oh, and today, 2 major countries have recently begun using lotteries to reshape how they do politics, and it's actually working. So, I'm going to explain how this works, how the ancients used it, and why lottery is so effective. Along the way, I'll take the arguments against it seriously, and we'll hear from real participants in today's modern experiments who went in skeptical or downright angry.
I thought it was a scam.
At first, I thought I'll punch him through the window.
But who by the end were completely sold.
There is a communion of souls. You feel it.
This is the case for a return to lottery, a case for rebuilding politics without politicians. To understand how and why lottery works, we need to take a look at how the Athenians used it. Their system, not unlike America's government today, was sort of organized around 3 core branches. The assembly was a legislature where laws were debated, drafted, and chosen, but instead of politicians, it was full of whichever citizens showed up that day, usually some 6,000 people. Now, participation was extremely limited by modern standards. No women, and Athens had a vast enslaved population, but Athenian citizenship extended to all free adult males, making Athens actually more inclusive than even 1800s America. The council, meanwhile, functioned like a sort of executive branch, setting the assembly's agenda and ensuring the implementation of its laws. But instead of a president, this too was filled by ordinary citizens. 500 of them, randomly selected to serve for 1 year at a time. To do that, they used a device like this, a clariterion, an ancient lottery machine. Names were inscribed on small ceramic pieces, then inserted into the face. Some numbered or colored balls were then dispensed to determine which names were drawn, and all of this was done in public so everyone could see the system wasn't being rigged. This is modeled after archaeological findings of claritaria believed to be used in jury selection, because yes, the courts, not unlike our own, randomly selected jurors to preside over cases each day. Except in Athens, it was random citizens only, no judges allowed. You can see some of the DNA of our own government here, in the birthplace of Western civilization, but its most crucial quality, popular power and real participation, has since been largely stripped away. Today, we get to cast a vote every few years, while in the meantime, vast governmental and corporate structures frequently ignore our demands, while investing massive amounts of money into tracking every little thing about us. I know this because if I look myself up on the internet, I can see my personal information for sale. Phone numbers, addresses, you name it, to anyone, even scammers and stalkers. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. That's why I'm proud to have Delete Me sponsoring this video. With Delete Me, you can scrape your identity and personal information from hundreds of websites with the click of a button. Just tell Delete Me what you want removed, and within 7 days, their experts and proprietary systems generate a report on what they've found, while they get to work getting it all taken down. Afterwards, Delete Me stays vigilant 24/7, all year long. If you want your privacy back, you can get 20% off Delete Me right now using our code SPECTACLES at joindeleteme.com/spectacles, also in the description and pinned comment below. See why New York Times Wirecutter called Delete Me the best data removal service out there by using our link joindeleteme.com/spectacles to get 20% off and start scraping your information off the internet today. Thank you, Delete Me. Now, back to Athens. Like us, they had a sort of 3-branch system, but at every turn, the people, not politicians or professionals or experts, were in charge. So, did it work? Yeah. This democratic system brought many more Athenians into the fold, gave them a reason to care, and expanded the perspective of the political institutions with the life experiences of merchants, sailors, farmers, laborers, and yes, some wealthy aristocrats. With this democracy, for the next 200 years, Athens ascended to greatness. At its height, it was a naval superpower, a commercial empire, and the stomping ground of some of the most innovative thinkers in history. But this system was forgotten because it ruined the city with faction and infighting. At least, that's what you'd think if you read what the American founders had to say about Athens, but that never actually happened. Though Athens had its fair share of civil strife, over 2 centuries, democracy repeatedly won out and proved remarkably durable. It only fell to an army led by Philip of Macedon and his son Alexander the Great, who went on to conquer 2 million square miles across Asia. Now, talk about tough luck. So, why then were America's founders so mistaken about Athenian democracy? Well, for 2,000 years after Athens fell, democracy lay dormant, almost forgotten, until something happened. In the 1600s, new scientific discoveries and groundbreaking technologies empowered a growing class of wealthy citizens to question the old establishment forces of monarchy and religion. By the late 1700s, this movement reached its peak when colonists in America rose up against the British crown in a fight for national independence. And when they succeeded, it seemed like lottery and democracy had a chance for a comeback millennia in the making. But the American founders rejected it. Instead of lottery and democracy, they chose elections and republicanism. From one perspective, this was understandable. Athens was one city. America was spread across 13 states over 1,000 miles. Getting random citizens to and from the capital in the 1700s would have been a nightmare. But the founders went further, condemning democracy as a faction-riddled mess that would destroy any society where it took root. And in part, that's probably because the American Revolution was powered by wealthy farmers, merchants, and lawyers, men of wealth and property. They needed a way to consult the broader population, of property-owning white men, that is, while practically limiting competition for real power to a narrow political elite with the leisure time to spare politicking in Washington, D.C. The best way to do that? Elections. Now, the founders did also make a number of apparently compelling arguments for the advantages of elections. They argued elections were effective at synthesizing and representing diverse interests. They argued elections delegated power to wise, capable men, filtering and refining coarse public opinion. They argued elections provided a system of accountability that would avert corruption and punish poor leadership. And most importantly, they argued elections would prevent faction and division, which, if left unchecked, would result in civil war and social collapse. Now, they probably believed those arguments, but in the 250 years since then, American history and modern scientific research have proven them wrong. On all four counts, representation, knowledge, trust, and unity, the ancient Athenian lottery outperformed modern elections. Let's start with representation. The Athenian approach is built on the principle of koinos, meaning common, shared, or ordinary, because this is how Athens treated power. If you wanted to participate in politics, you needed some free time to attend the assembly, though a daily stipend for attendees helped. You had to be willing to throw your name in the clereterion, and you had to care about your city. Now, this work wasn't easy. It was seriously demanding of people's time, but it was fundamentally accessible to every citizen. Compare that to America. On the one hand, participation is easier. Just show up to vote once every few years and you're done. But on the other hand, to make a real impact, to actually participate, it's incredibly exclusive. Standing for an election means committing to a multi-year project of traveling, glad-handing, self-advertising, and fundraising. One of these is a lot more inviting to normal people, and one of them is a lot more inviting to nutcases. This is called selection bias. Only certain kinds of people want to stand in elections or stand any chance of winning them. The charismatic, the beautiful, the confident, the wealthy, and well-connected. In turn, voters have only a narrow choice, and elections produce a small, homogeneous political elite that looks nothing like the public and frequently cares little about their problems. Elections merely give people a choice of their preferred member of the elite. That's why Aristotle called them oligarchic. By contrast, he defined democracy as a regime in which everyone may have a turn at being in power, and that is what Athenian lottery achieved. By filling their assemblies with whoever showed up and their public offices and juries with citizens selected by lottery, the Athenians acted like statisticians, producing a representative slice of Athenian society with large random samples. By replacing politicians with the people, Athens ensured that politics served the people. It was politics by the people, of the people, for the people, not politics for politicians. And this koinos, this superior representation, it doesn't just apply to ancient lottery. Modern lotteries in Ireland have revealed the exact same pattern, which we'll discuss in just a bit. But maybe you're thinking that electoral selection bias is valuable in its own way. Politics is a hard job and it requires certain skills. But random samples don't just make politics more representative. They actually make politics smarter, and I can prove it. This is sophos, the wisdom of lottery. In the early 2000s, Scott Page, a researcher at Caltech, found something unexpected. He observed that when faced with a task, given certain conditions, a randomly selected collection of problem solvers outperforms a collection of the best individual problem solvers. In other words, a random group is usually better at problem solving than a group of experts. Well, that's a big claim, and his investigation and research are nuanced and complicated. Moreover, there's a lot of modern cognitive science research that backs this conclusion up. These books and this video by Vsauce are great if you want to learn more, but the simple explanation is this. More talented problem solvers tend to think in similar ways. Frequently, they've received similar educations at similar elite colleges and lead similar lives. As a result, they're vulnerable to similar blind spots, and they tend to fall prey to groupthink biases. Does that sound familiar? On the other hand, groups with diverse cognitive styles, people who think about things in different ways, tend to be more effective because they see things their peers miss and tend to be more comprehensive in their exploration of solutions. In short, cognitive diversity trumps ability. Therefore, politics should seek to replicate cognitive diversity in deliberative decision-making. And elections don't achieve that. Elections don't produce koinos. They don't replicate the cognitive diversity of the public because they select for a very particular type of individual, about whom voters only get rare opportunities to simply thumb up or thumb down. That's not deliberation. The Athenian council, assembly, and juries couldn't be more different. These institutions operated like a city in microcosm, with a share of large landowners and brash wealthy businessmen, yes, but also artisans and day laborers, sailors and subsistence farmers, all of them with their own knowledge, expertise, experience, perspectives, and their own distinct approaches to problem solving. And here, citizens got into the nitty-gritty details of politics, crafted policies through hours of conversation and argument, and spent a lifetime learning to deliberate and govern. By achieving koinos, or representation through random sampling, Athens also achieved sophos, superior political intelligence through cognitive diversity. And this virtue isn't just limited to ancient Athens. Just a few years ago, as we'll see shortly, a lottery-selected body in France solved a major problem that had stumped politicians for years. Except there's just one problem. This diversity trumps ability theorem assumes everyone is actually working toward the same goal. But what if some of these random citizens are just selfish or badly motivated? At least with elections, there's some public scrutiny. We know who holds office, and we can choose not to elect them again if they become corrupt. But remember, elections actually prioritize selfish and ambitious people. And as for elections preventing corruption, well, how's that working out? No, here too, lottery has the advantage, and it's called euthena, the examination. Before taking office, every person selected by lottery in Athens was subjected to an intensive public audit assessing not his competence, but his character and integrity. If enough citizens came forward to complain about someone, he'd actually be passed over. But if he passed after his single-year term, he was then examined again, compelled to report on his time in office and show how he used public funds during his term. Failure of an audit like this resulted in a severe fine or worse, and at the head of every euthena were again ordinary citizens. In Athens, accountability wasn't institutionalized, it was socialized, every citizen checking each other. In America, by contrast, a Byzantine system of ethics watchdogs, inspectors general, and congressional oversight committees, far removed from public scrutiny, sit contentedly alongside campaign finance, lobbying, corporate revolving doors, congressional stock trading, and life-serving career politicians who keep doing corrupt shit until the day they drop dead. All of which, if ordinary people had a say, would be outlawed and punished tomorrow. So, koinos, sophos, euthena. The American founders said elections were the key to representative government, to intelligent and capable government, and to accountable government. But on each count, they were wrong to discount the ancient wisdom of the old Athenian lottery. Yet there was one last issue they thought more important than any of these. Faction, also known as division or polarization. In one of the most cited defenses of the American Constitution, James Madison called faction, quote, "the mortal disease under which popular governments have everywhere perished, for which democracy can admit of no cure." Elections, on the other hand, he called the cure. Now, the US is still standing, so elections haven't been a complete failure on this front, but we did fight a horrible civil war less than 100 years after Madison's essay, and today, America is deeply polarized. Enter the fourth and most crucial virtue of lottery, henates, unity. Imagine that you've just been selected for the Athenian Council. Now, Athens was tiny by modern standards, maybe 30,000 adult male citizens, but even so, no one person could have possibly known everyone else. A year-long appointment to an intensely demanding job with total strangers may sound like a recipe for disaster, but think of the bonds that it would build. Then add to that occasional attendance of the assembly and service on juries alongside thousands more fellow citizens. Then multiply all of that year over year for a lifetime. Think of the civic pride and spirit. Compare that to American elections, where politicians are sorted into political teams before they even take office. Madison was dead wrong. Elections force us into faction, to join opposing teams to cheer for each other's defeat.
I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them.
Lottery and public assemblies force us to work together. But it's not just a thought experiment. For nearly 250 years, despite repeated coups by oligarchs and foreign invasions, time after time, the Athenians restored the democratic system. And this henates, this unity, still shines through today in modern experiments with lottery. So let's take a look at those stories and learn how Ireland and France took the ancient wisdom of koinos, sophos, euthana, and henates and applied them to our modern world. First, let's look at Ireland. Between 2013 and 2014, 100 Irish citizens, 2/3 ordinary people and 1/3 politicians, were randomly selected to form a constitutional convention to tackle a handful of issues that were gridlocking the country's parliament. And when it started, henates was nowhere to be found.
At first, I thought I'll punch him through the window.
That's Finbarr O'Brien, describing his first encounter with one of his fellow convention participants, an openly gay man named Chris Lyons. One look at him, and Finbarr was filled with hate. You see, one of the issues the convention had to resolve was the question of gay marriage, a contentious topic in this deeply Catholic country. Yet Finbarr didn't attack Chris, and he didn't leave. Over 10 weekends, he joined the group deliberations, frequently voicing his opposition. That is, until toward the end, when he stood up to share something he hadn't told anyone. When he was a child, Finbarr explained, he'd been sexually abused by an older man. For decades, he'd hated gay men. But over the course of the convention, he'd realized that the people he thought were his enemies were rather a lot like him. He'd changed his mind. In the end, the convention, including Finbarr, recommended that same-sex marriage be legalized in Ireland. Not only did this convention prove the incredible power of henates, of unity in democratic lottery, this decision proved its koinos and its sophos. Where politicians had been gridlocked for years, the convention broke through and represented the public will. Put to a referendum, the convention's recommendation was approved by 62% of voters. Since then, Ireland has continued to form new conventions by lottery. These filled 100% with ordinary citizens, and they've continued to succeed where politicians fail, tackling tough issues that are hard to solve with electoral horse races. The next convention, discussing abortion, recommended reforms that passed in a referendum with a historic high 66% of the vote. But Ireland isn't alone. France has also begun experimenting with lottery. In early 2019, when massive protests against a proposed carbon tax plunged the country into chaos, President Macron spent 3 months touring the country to hear people's concerns. And at the end, nothing happened. Macron, citing experts, insisted that the carbon tax was simply the only way. So the protests continued, and when some academics approached Macron with the idea of a lottery, he was desperate enough to sign off. Then, when the 150 randomly selected citizens convened in Paris to form the Citizens' Convention on Climate Change, Macron promised them that their recommendations would be applied to law or referendum, quote, without filter. But some participants were unsure of the whole thing.
I thought it was a scam.
That's Jules, one of the 150. When he arrived, Jules was a skeptic of climate change and of the whole lottery business. On day one, he refused to check his luggage at the door of the convention, swearing he was just about to leave at any minute. But Jules stayed, and though he never changed his mind on climate change, he found a sense of belonging, a sort of civic family in the convention.
There are a lot of members who love me very much, and whom I love very much. There is a communion of souls. You feel it.
This is, yet again, lottery proving its power of henates, of unity. But the convention proved more than that. It proved lottery's sophos, its power of collective wisdom, and its euthana, its accountability. Repeatedly, in the face of enormous protests, political elites backed up by experts swore up and down that a carbon tax was the only way. But in the end, the Citizens' Convention produced 149 proposals to address climate change, not one of them using a carbon tax. And afterward, French politicians doubled down on their duplicity by refusing to apply the convention's recommendations to law or to a referendum like they promised. Now, eventually, public outrage compelled French politicians to pass some of the convention's proposals, producing the most ambitious climate legislation in French history. Unfortunately, this does mean the convention has been less successful than one would have hoped, though not because lottery failed, but because politicians obstructed the people's accomplishments. Randomly selected ordinary citizens aren't just more representative than politicians. They aren't just more intelligent than politicians. They aren't just more accountable than politicians. Ordinary citizens care more than politicians. About each other, about their communities, and about doing the right thing. So, how can we apply lottery today? How can we conjure the forces of Koinos, Sophos, Euthana, and Hanates to improve our politics? Unfortunately, France shows just how limited the impact of reform can be if applied in half measures. Athenian lottery worked because it defined the shape of the citizen's life. We, on the other hand, have forgotten how to be political animals. For lottery democracy to work, the average American must expect at least once, if not more than once, to be called to serve at some level of government at some point in their life. That would mean lotteries, assemblies, councils at every level, from the national all the way down to the local. That is ambitious, and in truth, lottery probably can't solve all our problems. No one reform ever can. Nor do we really know exactly what would happen if we went full bore on it tomorrow. So even if we can't, or maybe shouldn't, replace all our elections with Powerballs tomorrow, we do know a few things. We know that elections have real oligarchic tendencies we need to take seriously if we're going to restore any public faith in popular government. We know that the founders were wrong to write lottery off completely because we know that it has some real virtues. And we know that in countries that have tried it recently, this ancient method has proven just as effective as it was 2,500 years ago. If you want to learn more about lottery, read this book by Yale political scientist Hélène Landemore, published just this February, Politics Without Politicians. And in the meantime, if you want to support our efforts to tell more stories that matter to democracy, consider becoming a YouTube or Patreon member for some exclusive content, grabbing some merch like this shirt or this poster, or by patronizing our sponsor, Delete Me. It's a great way to stay safe on the internet, and every sign-up supports the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.